Mental Breakdown. I'm Dr. Berney, and this is episode 32. Well, the holidays are upon us. Later this week is Thanksgiving. Just a couple of weeks away is Christmas. And so in this podcast, we are talking about some of the issues that are very common for people during the holiday season, whether it's stress or depression. There are lots of different feelings that we experience during the holidays. And many of those symptoms come as a result of identifiable causes. And so what we talk about in this podcast is the way that some of those identifiable causes are things that we deal with in everyday life. We'll provide you some ideas and recommendations for dealing with some of those issues and hope that it's useful for you as you make it into the new year. But before we get to the podcast, just a couple of announcements. Last week we had a great workshop on medication myths and misperceptions. Hopefully I'll have that posted up on YouTube pretty soon so that you can check it out and write to us with any comments or ideas or thoughts that you have about that. Our next workshop will be December 11th, and it's called Preparing for the Holidays, where we're going to talk about some of these same things that we talked about in this podcast. That workshop will be held at the Florida Industrial and Phosphate Research Institute, the same place that we have all of our workshops. And you can check our website or Facebook page for more information on that. The website is PACFlorida, PACFlorida.com/workshops.html. So check it out, see if it's something you think you might be interested in, and register. That'll be great. We'd love to see you. Also, as you know, you can follow us on lots of different forms of social media. We're on Twitter at Dr. Berney is the handle, so it's at DRBERNEY. We post lots of things on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook. We have several Facebook pages, including The Mental Breakdown, Paedeia, Paedeia, and our practice has its own Facebook page, which is Psychological Associates of Central Florida. You can also follow us on iTunes. We hope that if you follow us on iTunes that you'd be willing to write us a review or rate us. It's through your ratings and comments that other people can find us and join in on the conversation and hopefully benefit from some of the things that we are trying to share. So if you have the opportunity, jump on iTunes, write a short review. We'd love it. Thank you so much. All right. Well, with that, we hope that you enjoy the show, episode 32. Breakdown for real this time. I'm Dr. Berney.
And I'm Dr. Richard. Again, I'm still Dr. Richard.
So if you're listening to this on the podcast, you're probably wondering what's going on, why we would start out that way. Well, when we were getting started, in some way, somehow, I started recording our podcast on the Mixlr page for Paedeia instead of the Mixlr page for the Mental Breakdown. So we had to switch over, but we're here now, and everything's good. No problem, right?
Happy to be here.
Yeah, no worries. So what we were talking about before we realized what was happening was we were talking about the holidays.
That they're suddenly upon us.
The holidays are here. Mm-hmm. And so today's podcast is entitled Managing the Holidays, or more specifically, we're going to talk about Thanksgiving as a metaphor for life. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it suddenly struck us that as we were, tell the listeners about this workshop that's coming up, because that's what actually produced today's podcast.
Exactly. On December 11th, next month, Friday, we're going to have our next workshop. That is entitled Managing the Holidays. Right. And that workshop is going to be all about helping you manage, understand, appreciate, and for lack of a better word, survive the holiday season, how we can get through it, dealing with all of the emotions, all of the stress, all of the frustration that often accompanies the holidays. Mm-hmm. And so that workshop is going to be all about all about the holidays. And so as we were putting that workshop together, thinking about that workshop and putting our ideas together with it, we started thinking that the holidays really are a metaphor for the rest of our life, everything else in our life.
That's right. Typically, when you get to this time of year, there are all kinds of advice columns about how to handle the holidays and what you need to do and what you can do and what you can't do. And people get depressed during the holidays, and we drink too much and we eat too much. But it's generally the same kind of information and the same kind of advice, regardless of where you go. And as we were putting together that workshop for how to handle the holidays, we began discussing these issues and thought, well, most of these things have been talked about and discussed, and advice has been given. And then it occurred to us that the advice that we would give people for managing Thanksgiving, the holiday that's coming up next week is Thanksgiving, and the advice that we would give people for Thanksgiving is advice that we would give them for the other 12 months of the year. The Thanksgiving, as we looked at it, it suddenly dawned on us that Thanksgiving was sort of a metaphor. The advice we would give for Thanksgiving is a metaphor for how we should live the rest of our lives. If you want to live an emotionally healthy life, these are the things that you should do every day, not just on Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We hope that it's helpful for you and makes you think a little bit as you're preparing for next week, because next week can be a very stressful time. If we have time, we also want to throw in and talk a little bit about that almost a holiday. Well, I use the word holiday very loosely with this, but almost a new holiday in and of itself, and that is Black Friday. I think that we should talk a little bit about that.
That's taking on a significance almost equal to Thanksgiving.
Right. Yeah, there's Thanksgiving and then there's Black Friday.
I always forget about that because I don't observe Black Friday.
No?
I always stay hidden behind locked doors. But you're right. For many people, Black Friday has become almost as perhaps more important than Thursday.
Right.
Thanksgiving.
Right, because we see that as a day that where Christmas shopping officially begins, and talk about stress and ridiculousness, really. But we'll talk about that if we have a little bit of time. So we apologize for not having a podcast last week. Our schedules were crazy last week. We had a workshop last Friday during the time that we usually record our podcast. Right. So we're hoping to. I've been working hard to get that video edited so that we can get it up on YouTube. We're working to get our podcast up on YouTube as well. So I have a lot of YouTube work happening right now. Right. I need to get with our webmaster and get that guy.
That we'll do over the holidays.
Right.
See,
right.
We have our holiday functions.
Right.
Holiday duties to perform as well.
That's right.
But that when you mentioned the workshops, Dr. Berney's mentioned 2 workshops. We do a workshop one Friday morning every month.
Correct.
And when we do the workshop, then we can't do the podcast.
Right.
Okay? We're going to try to fix that, but that's what Dr. B is talking about with the workshops. And take a look at those. You're certainly invited to attend, but that explains why we couldn't do a podcast last week. So please try to catch up with those workshops.
Yes. So, all right. So on to our topic for the day, and Richard, when we think about the holidays, and most specifically Thanksgiving, the first thing that I think comes to a lot of people's mind is, right? It's overwhelming.
Oh no, it's Thanksgiving again.
And the reason that we feel that way is because for most of us, we end up in situations where we're just in situations where we don't want to be.
Right.
We have to go places that we don't want to go. We have to do things we don't want to do. And so we're going to talk about each of these sort of pieces of the frustration. And again, as we said before, it's very analogous to life. It's very consistent with other recommendations that we make in life.
That's right.
And the question is, why should really the holidays be any different?
Right.
So let's start with the first one. during the holidays, one of the frustrations I think that many people talk about is that they have to do things that they wouldn't otherwise want to do.
Right.
Now, that's we're going to get the next two are a little bit more specific, but when it comes to that one, we have to do things that we don't usually want to do. And there are a lot of examples that come from the holidays to exemplify that. During the holidays, we nobody really wants, well, I say nobody, I do know a few people who want to spend hours in stores.
Right.
They want to spend hours in stores. We fight the crowds. We fight traffic to get to stores and to get to the shopping centers. Nobody really wants to do any of those things, but we do it anyways because and the recurring theme here is we feel an obligation.
Right.
We feel like this is what we have to do.
Right.
And so as we're getting started with this, what we want to talk about is we need to create a situation in our life where we do the things we want to do and minimize the things that we don't want to do.
That's right. Yeah, as we look forward to Thanksgiving, most of us, when we anticipate Thanksgiving, we think about the meal. That's the centerpiece of Thanksgiving, the meal. And we want it to be like the TV commercial. We want it to be like the Norman Rockwell painting. We have great hope and expectation that this year it's going to really be good. And that, and part of that is selective memory. We think of past Thanksgivings, but we tend to remember the good things and forget the bad things that happened.
Right.
And so we have this this hope, this expectation that this Thanksgiving is going to be the Norman Rockwell painting, or it's going to look like the TV commercial for Thanksgiving. It usually doesn't work out that way. And in fact, most people, they would like for it to work out, but they face that Thanksgiving meal with some dread.
Right.
And it's something they really don't want to do. People who cook that meal every year say it's the most difficult meal to cook. You have to shop it takes one day to shop, it takes a day to prepare, and it takes a day to deal with the leftovers. And most people just find it overwhelming. But we really want to make it work. But we really don't want to do that.
Right.
I mean, so many of us approach next Thursday with the feeling that I'd really like for this to pass by. I really don't want to do it, but I feel this obligation.
Right.
And so you meant when you had the sense of obligation.
Absolutely.
And I want to make it as good as it possibly can be. So, but we really don't want to do it. And then it struck us. We said, well, that kind of goes across the entire year. There are so many things that we do in the course of a year that we really don't want to do, but we do them anyway. And that's one of the reasons we get ourselves into trouble, is we're doing things that we really don't want to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, we push through it anyways. Mm-hmm. And this sort of bleeds into some of the other issues that we're going to talk about. But, when we're doing these things that we don't really want to do, how happy are we about it? Well, we're not very happy about it. We're frustrated, we're stressed, we're overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. It leads to anger, and it leads to conflict. Mm-hmm. And so then we end up in a situation where we're doing something we don't want to do, we're upset about it, and now we're getting upset about lots of other things as well. Mm-hmm. And it affects the entire thing. And I think that your example is great because, we look at Publix commercials,
right? And
it looks like, oh my gosh, look at everybody's having such a great time. All the kids are behaving. They're sitting at the table quietly.
They're well dressed.
We bring this nice big turkey out to the table, and we hope, or we idealize that life is going to be this Hallmark commercial or this mm-hmm. Publix commercial, mm-hmm. and it's not. Right. For the vast majority of people, I'm sure there's somebody out there mm-hmm. where it's like that, but for the vast majority of people, that's not mm-hmm. close to reality.
Right.
And so, we often find ourselves in a situation where we do things that we don't want to do. And as you said, this is everyday life. Mm-hmm. Every day in life, we are in a situation where we have to do things that we don't want to do.
That's right.
And we need to figure out how we're going to manage that.
That's right. You have to then sit, if this is something you really don't want to do, and we talk to many, many people who say to us, I dread going to my sisters. I dread going to my parents. They dread this thing. I think at that point you have to sit down and clear your head and think long and hard about why you don't want to do this. First step is figure out what it is about this that makes it onerous or difficult or stressful or frustrating. What is it about this event that really bothers you? And should you consider not going?
Right.
What is it about this that bothers you? And should you think seriously about not going? This is a conversation that you really have to have with yourself. Whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve or 4th of July or a fishing trip to Canada, no matter what it is, if you really find this event distasteful, stressful, difficult, then think about it, and maybe you should think about not doing it. If it's going to cause that amount of distress, dissonance, or discomfort, perhaps you should think about not doing it.
Right. So we again relate this to everyday life. Mm-hmm. You may hate your job. Right. You may really dislike your job. You have a choice, but there, as you're making these decisions, you have to understand that, not going, this is how people are going to respond. Right. Going and being unhappy, mm-hmm. this is how people are going to respond. Mm-hmm. And we wrote a column in the Ledger a couple of weeks ago called I can't remember. The Ledger always changes the titles. I called it Positivity Begets Positivity. Right. And what we're talking about is when you go into situations, even if it may be a tough situation, if you go into the situation with a positive attitude, mm-hmm. you tend to have a more positive experience. For whatever reason, not only do we see these situations as things we don't really want to do, but we go into it with dread. We enter into the activity with this idea that this is going to be negative. Right. And obviously, when you go into it expecting it to be bad, you're going to look for all the reasons to justify why it's bad. That's right. So, again, thinking realistically, we can give you advice that's idealized, that isn't go quit your job if you're unhappy. That's not real life. Right. But at the same time, you can change the way that you approach these situations.
That's right.
You can look for the positives mm-hmm. in what you're going to do. Sure, Thanksgiving dinner may be a dread to prepare, but if you analyze it, as Dr. Richard was just saying, if you analyze it and say, I really don't want to do this, but I have to do this, mm-hmm. I'm in a situation where I have to do this, then approach it from the perspective that, I'm going to make the best out of this that I can. Right. I'm going to recruit help. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. Right. If the turkey's dry, that's okay. You know what?
Only one meal out of 21 that you have that week.
That's right. Pour some gravy on it, and it'll be okay.
Well, I like your job analogy, too, because the other thing to remember is that, so you hate your job. Okay, well, then quit. Well, if you quit your job, there are going to be consequences. Right. You're not going to get a paycheck, okay? Yes, you can quit your job. There'll be consequences. One consequence is if you quit your job, you don't get a paycheck. So you've decided to keep your job. Well, then make the best of it. Okay? Right. You have to be there. You need a paycheck. So you make the best of the situation. Same with Thanksgiving. Right. If you don't go to Thanksgiving, there are going to be consequences. Family members are going to be critical. They're going to call you. They're going to wonder why. They're going to ask you. They're going to be angry. Those are consequences. If you do go, you're going to be miserable. Mm-hmm. You're going to have consequences either way, no matter what decision you make. But if you decide to go, then live with the consequences. Right. Don't ask not to have consequences. Right. Okay. And I think that's the problem. One of the problems people get into. I don't want to work, but I want a paycheck. Right. I don't want to go, but I don't want anybody to ask me why I didn't go. No, people are going to ask you why you didn't go. So you have consequences regardless of the decision you make. But if you make the decision to go, then make the most of it for yourself, and make the most of it for the other people who are there. Right. And the take-home message for this first one is, to the best of your ability, create your own consequences. That's right. There is no hard, fast rule that says when you go to work, you're going to have a miserable time. There's no hard, fast rule that says when you go to Thanksgiving, it's going to be miserable. Mm-hmm. You go into it expecting that, and you make that happen. Right. But if you
change your perspective from the get-go, from the front, then you find that it's much more manageable. It's much more realistic as it relates to just enjoying the time that you're meant to have during that activity. So, with this first one, there's lots of times in life where we have to do things that we don't really want to do. When you have those situations, the take-home message is you're responsible for your experience of that. You're responsible for how you manage those situations and how you experience it and how you appreciate it and what you get from it. And so go into it with that mindset. Right. Go into it understanding that it's up to you to make this a good thing.
That's right. And no matter what you're facing, you have to manage your own expectations and you have to manage the consequences. But if you're in control, if they're your expectations, if they're your consequences, and you've made these decisions and it's the right decision, I think you're going to find that decision is easier to make and the consequences are easier to live with.
Yes.
Because you have this sense of control. You've thought through it, you've considered it, you know why you're making the decision you're making, and you manage the consequences. And that sort of internal control, we talked about locus of control a few weeks ago, that you feel that you have some control is going to make your decision much easier.
Absolutely. So as we move on to the next one, the next topic is that, or the next analogy to life is that many times from the holidays, we have to spend time with people that we don't necessarily want to spend time with.
Some are close relatives, some are family members that you really don't want to be around.
Right. And obviously, there are lots of reasons for this. And, we're not going to, again, idealize things that says, oh, well, in the holidays, you need to push all that aside and you need to forget all that. Because while that would be great, it's not easy to do.
Right.
We do often encourage people, especially during this time of year, to do the best they can to take those past negative experiences and try to turn them around and try to heal some of those wounds and some of those broken relationships. But again, the reality is that it's not easy to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. We say to people all the time, well, put all those differences aside. It's the holiday time. Most people can't do that. It's very difficult to put all this aside because it's the holidays. In a way, it's good advice. You need to learn how to manage those relationships.
Right.
Okay, so yes, we encourage you to manage those. But it struck us that we're getting together during the holiday season. We're getting together with people that it's very difficult to be with. That some of these people we really don't like. We don't get along well. Maybe our children don't get along with each other, or we don't get along with in-laws, or we don't get along with a particular aunt or uncle. And so we find ourselves in the situation of being with people we really don't like to be with. And it suddenly struck us, geez, that happens more often than just Thanksgiving and Christmas. Throughout the year, we find ourselves with people that we really don't like to be with.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. How many co-employees
Co-workers.
do you have that it's just if you didn't have to sit in a cubicle next to that person, you would be okay never talking with with that person.
Yeah, there are people you hope they take a sick day every day. That they're just not in the building that day.
Right.
We've all experienced that.
Right. And that's just real life. We're not going to relate well with everyone. And biology does not automatically create this wonderful relationship. Relationships are emotional. They're not biological.
Yeah, students come in here all the time. I hate my English teacher. I hate my science teacher. It's one of the frequent complaints that kids make, okay? You got to learn how to manage that, okay? You have to change it, or you got to learn how to manage it.
Right. So with this and how this relates again to real life is absolutely you're going to have situations where you're going to be interacting with people that you would otherwise choose not to. But just as our recommendations and our encouragement was with the first one, our encouragement here is you still have to find a way to make the best out of it.
Right.
If your coworker is someone that you would hope is on a sick day every day, you still need to find a way to work with that person. Now, we're not saying you go out for drinks or you go out to dinner after work or anything like that. That's not realistic. But what we tend to have difficulty with is understanding that the other person has a perspective of life as well, and that their perspective of life was created and fueled by their life experiences. And so they're entering into all of these relationships and these interactions with you from a very different place than you. So when you have that person who is obnoxious because all they want to talk about are things that you have absolutely no interest in, the way that you want to approach a situation like that is you just stop and say, okay, thank you for the information. I'm going to get back to work. There's no reason to be angry about that. There's no reason to be frustrated and rageful about that, because that person's just coming from a different set of life experiences than you. Right. And I think that for a lot of people, just having that perspective changes things.
Yeah. Let's take this Thanksgiving. One of the things that happens is frequently there's somebody, when you talk about people talking about things or discussing it, frequently people talk about, they start bragging about their children, how well their children are doing in school. Or they brag about the vacation they took during the summer. And they go on and on and on. That doesn't really need to bother me.
Right.
I mean, that's my decision.
Right.
My sister, if it's my sister, if she wants to talk about her children and her vacations and the swimming pool that they just built or the boat that they just bought, that's her business. She's allowed to do that. I mean, when I decided to go to the meal, I accepted that some people are going to talk about things that I may not be interested in. But I can control my reaction to that.
Right.
That's my obligation.
Absolutely.
Is that I have to manage my own reaction to that. Okay. I don't have the luxury of being offensive or telling her that she's being inappropriate. You just sit and listen.
Right.
Put one of your kids on your lap and hold them while you're listening.
Right. Or escape.
Go do the dishes.
Go do dishes. Go outside and that's what I do. At our holidays is I'm always in the backyard kicking the soccer ball or throwing a football or something with the kids.
You don't listen to that stuff.
No, because it's just it gets overwhelming. Right. And so I listen to it for as long as I can, and when I need a break, I go out and I go do something else, and then I'll come back and I'll talk some more, sit at the table and talk some more. And then when I need to, I escape again.
And you're managing the situation. You're not getting you're not angry with anybody.
Right.
You're not upset that she's talking about how brilliant her children are or how good they are in athletics. You're managing yourself no matter what else is going on around you.
Right.
Okay? Because we are going to be with people we don't like. We're related to some of them.
Right.
And but you have to be polite. And you have to do the right thing.
Right. Okay? Because when you do the wrong thing, it only makes it worse. Right. And the other piece of this that I think is important to mention is that for as difficult as some of these situations may be for us, whether we're stressed at work, stressed at the holidays, whatever this particular setting is, it may be equally stressful for them.
That's right.
And so, if you're avoiding people because, man, every time I go talk to this coworker, he's so angry and cranky and irritable. Well, you know what? He may be just as unhappy with his position at work or his situation with work as you may be. And so
it's just expressed in a different way.
Right.
Some people, when they're unhappy, they talk too much. They become hyperlexic. They begin to talk about stuff when they become nervous or upset. Think about it. Stop, become mindful, and manage yourself.
And I think mindful is the right word, because what you want to keep in mind is that there are a multitude of perspectives for all of these settings, all of these situations, whether it's the Thanksgiving dinner or it's Monday morning at the office. There's different perspectives, and those perspectives drive all of the individual sets of behaviors that you and your coworkers and your family use.
That's right.
So when we take the time, when we are the mindful ones, when you take the chance to be mindful and step back and consider these different perspectives, it does change the way that you see things. I remember a while back, I worked with this guy, and what was interesting about it is my wife really had a difficult time with this guy, because the things he talked about, the way that he talked about things, and the way that he did things, it was just very frustrating for my wife. I worked with the guy almost every day, and I was just able to say, that's just the way that he is. There's nothing I'm going to do about that.
Right.
There's no way that I'm going to change it. If I'm standing there and we're working in the same department, and he's going on and I'm getting aggravated with it, all I'm going to say is, hey man, I'm going to go over and do this real quick, and then I'll take my 5-minute break, and then come back and reset the situation.
That's right.
But we have to take control of ourselves in these situations, because we can't control the other people. We can't change who they are. We can only control and manage and deal with ourselves.
Right. Yeah, when you're in these social settings, whether it's, if you put 12 people at a dinner table, 12 adults at a dinner table, some people are going to talk more than they normally do. Some people are going to stop talking. Some people will just chime in occasionally. You can't orchestrate the other 11 people.
Right.
All you can do is manage yourself. And you manage yourself as well as you can, knowing there's absolutely nothing you can do about how other people are acting or reacting who are sitting at the table. They're going to be doing what they do. Your only obligation is not to change them, not to manage them, but to take care of yourself.
Right. And remember that when you allow them to affect you, you're allowing them in.
You're allowing them in, right. Right.
And
that's not their fault.
Right. That's not them. That's on you.
That's right.
Not on them.
That's yours. If somebody's bothering you that much, that means you're letting them in. So all you have to do is forget about them and start focusing on yourself. How do I get them back out? Just nudge them gently back out. But that's for you to do. In the privacy of your own head, you got to get them out.
Right. Right. All right. Now the third one is, so we've talked about having to do things that you don't want to do, having to spend time with people that you don't necessarily want to spend time with.
Right.
And the last one is we have to go places where we don't typically want to go.
Right.
This reminds me, and I love the holidays in my family, because just about our whole family gets together.
On Thanksgiving.
We all get together for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. We all get together for those things. And it's great because, as our family continues to grow and all the kids are having kids and getting married and all this kind of stuff, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And because we don't all see each other in between these holidays, it's amazing to see how much the kids have grown. And I think there's going to be a lot of people in our family that's going to be very surprised at how big my son has gotten, because he's probably grown 6 inches since last year. And so those are exciting times. But we always tend to do this at my grandmother's house, which is very nice. It's an older house that my mom and her siblings all grew up in and everything. But she doesn't have central air. So
you pray for cold weather.
So we, and Thanksgiving is often okay. Christmas is great. But Easter is really challenging. Because, here in Central Florida, it's only 150,000 degrees outside. And then when you get 60 people inside her small wooden house, it is like an oven in there.
Sauna.
It is. It is. And we have worked and worked and worked to try to figure out a different place to have it. There was one year we had it at my uncle's house, which was fantastic.
He had
air conditioning, and so it was very nice. We had it one year. We actually had it at my house, and it was very nice because I have air conditioning. But it always ends up defaulting back to her house, and it's really challenging to say, okay, I have to go back out there and deal with this, because it's not I love the house, but in that type of situation, it's really a difficult place to be. But again, just as we're talking about with all these others, we have a decision to make.
Right.
And I think that that's a point that we haven't really made clear enough yet, is that these are our decisions.
That's right.
We have these choices to make. We can go or we cannot go.
Right.
You know, not every day, many people find themselves in situations where they're going to have to go someplace that they don't want to go. Whether it's the dentist, or it's a relative's house, or it's a store that we don't really want to go to because it's going to be busy, it's going to be this. Ultimately, it's our choice what we do.
Speaking of Black Friday.
And Black Friday is a good example of that.
This is a good example of it. Most men don't like to shop.
Right.
The way women like to shop.
Right.
And I don't mean to be sexist, but men don't shop the way women shop.
Right.
Men go in for the item that they want and they leave as quickly as they can. So Black Friday presents a challenge to many men.
Right.
So you have to make the decision, do you want to go or do you want to stay home? If you stay home, someone's going to be angry with you because you're not participating. If you go, you're going to be in situations that you hate.
Right.
Crowds, stores, shopping. So you have to make a decision. If you make the decision to go, bring a book, bring a lawn chair.
Right.
Make the best of the situation.
Right.
You hate going to these big box stores. Bring a chair and a book and some iced tea. They'll let you sit in the store. The women can, the rest of the family can shop to their heart's content. You're happy and they're happy.
Right. And really, a lot of this comes down to planning.
That's right. Thinking about it.
Right.
Think about it and plan accordingly.
Exactly. You know, one of the things we do, just as an example, is, and it's the most basic example, but I can't tell you how many times it saved us. You know, I've mentioned Connor. I've already mentioned him once today, my son, who's 14. He and I have a really difficult time shopping for long periods of time. We just don't like it. We need something else to happen.
You need a soccer ball to kick.
That's right. Well, and speaking of that, every car that we have, well, I have a car, my wife has a car. We have 3 things in that vehicle. We have folding chairs, we have a soccer ball, and we have a football.
Right.
We always have something to do. So if shopping is happening inside, if there's something going on, Connor and I will go out to the parking lot. We'll find an open spot in the parking lot, and we'll just juggle the ball, kick the ball back and forth, or do something like that. And you know, so when we find ourselves going to these situations that we really don't want to be in, you know, prepare for it.
That's right.
You know, have something to do. Bring your Sudoku book.
Right.
Bring a crossword puzzle. Bring something.
Bring a novel. Bring in the novel that you're reading.
And it's what's great about having the kind of phones that we all have now and iPads and things like that, because you can always have something in your pocket to do. Yeah. Exactly.
I would love to see a collection of men on lawn chairs outside of a big box store just socializing with each other, because most men don't want to be in there shopping, but they want to be with their wives and their families. Okay? Right. So the men are outside chatting, and the family can be in the store shopping. Right. It's a win-win, and that's what we're always looking for. How do I get a win-win? Right.
So when we find ourselves in these situations where we have to go someplace, have to be involved in something that we don't necessarily want to be involved with, just a little bit of planning can completely change the atmosphere, can completely change the way that we're approaching it and how we're dealing with it.
In fact, I might start an organization called Men in Lawn Chairs.
Well, and you know, again, the reality is that it's better for us in the long term. It is. Because, and again, you know, we're joking a little bit about, you know, the men being the ones not wanting to shop and all that kind of stuff, but it could go either direction.
It goes either way. Right.
And the key here is, and the bottom line here is that when we're miserable doing those things, it makes our significant other miserable, and that makes life miserable.
Yeah, don't go and be miserable.
Right.
Don't go to Thanksgiving dinner and be miserable. Don't go shopping and be miserable. Don't make the people around you miserable. If you've made the decision to go, then make the most of it.
Right. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, and that is positivity, begets positivity.
Right.
If you go into a situation and expect the best, it's likely to happen.
Right.
If you go into a situation and expect the worst, it's likely to happen.
Right.
And it's because of the way that we are as social creatures, as sentient beings. What we do is we go into situations with a certain expectation, and we look for every example that we can find that validates that expectation, because we like to be right. And so if we go into a situation and we think, if we go to the movies and we think, I really don't want to see this movie, guess what? You're not going to like that movie. Most likely, you're not going to like that movie.
Right.
If you go into it thinking this movie is going to be the greatest thing in the world, you're going to think that it's pretty good. Now, obviously, there are situations where that doesn't work. You know, you could go see Fantastic Four thinking that it's going to be a great movie and then be disappointed. I'm not saying that happened to me, but maybe it did. But there are situations where that doesn't happen. But when we think about those situations where it doesn't happen, it usually doesn't happen because no matter how much positivity you bring into it, it's not enough to overcome.
Right.
That's not usual. That's not typical.
That's right.
What's normal, what's usual, is that we enter into these situations and we think, you know what, this is going to be a great experience. Something good is going to come out of this.
Right.
And when we approach it that way, it tends to be true.
That's right. You may hate going, but you can go and have fun with your children.
Right.
You may hate going, but you can go and enjoy time with your spouse.
Right.
You know, you may hate going to your in-laws, but you can still have fun with your own family.
Right. And again, almost all of it takes two types of planning. Planning mentally and planning physically with activities.
Make sure there's a football and a soccer ball in the trunk of the car.
Always.
You know, that's right. Don't go unprepared.
Right. And if you do go unprepared, you got to find something else. You know, go for a walk.
Right.
You know, no matter where you're going, there's always a place to walk.
You're allowed to go for a walk. That's right.
And so, you know, when we don't do these things, when we go into these situations and we're unhappy, we don't want to be there. We don't want to be with these people. Again, whether it's the holidays or it's work, it results in three horrible things: stress, regret, and resentment.
Right.
And those are the things that, you know, really we need to work to avoid.
Right, because especially with stress, and we've talked about stress here before.
Right.
You know, stress is really damaging. We underestimate the negative effects, the negative impact of stress on our bodies. I mean, it is absolutely destructive. If the only analogy I can think of is you could drink some slow poison and it would have the same effect as stress, because when you're stressed, you're producing cortisol, which is a slow poison for the rest of your body. You compromise your immune system. You get autoimmune disorders. You you're susceptible to every germ there is. Stress is very damaging to your body. So you want to do anything you can to reduce stress.
Right.
That's your first obligation. When we talk about taking care of yourself, you have to stay away from things that you know are going to create stress. Or if you're going to be in a situation that you know is going to produce stress, then you have to think about what you can do mentally and physically. What can I manage to reduce the stress that I know I'm going to feel in this situation?
Yes, exactly. And the other two, regret and resentment.
That's right.
You know, the sad truth is that those are emotional reactions to things that are very difficult to overcome.
Right.
You know, the last thing you want is to experience resentment or regret, because it's fueled by the unknown. Well, what would have happened if? What what could have been? Right. And we can't answer those questions. And you know, we resent the other people who make us unhappy. We resent who we say make us unhappy, because again, our response to whatever happens is our response. It's not. It has
reaction.
Nothing to do with them. So, you know, by shifting the perspective the way that we've talked about today, shifting the perspective of, you know, positivity, and entering into these things well prepared,
that's right.
That is going to change things. So we are less likely to experience stress. We are less likely, and maybe more importantly, less likely to experience regret and resentment. And that's what the whole goal is. We want to be happy. We want to be satisfied. We want to have a good time. We want to enjoy other people. We want to enjoy our family. There's no... but it begins with us.
Right.
It begins with the way that we perceive it.
That's right. Once you make the decision to go to Thanksgiving dinner, okay, now, so you've thought about it and you decided, okay, I'm going to go. Once you make the decision to go, then you have three obligations. You have an obligation to take care of yourself. You have an obligation to manage your own stress. And you have the obligation, then the second thing is you have the obligation to others. Right. You have an obligation not to be part of the problem. Right. You can't go in there with a chip on your shoulder or ready to snap at the first person who offends you, because you're going to get offended. Right. That's why you don't want to go, because you know it's going to happen. So you, first of all, have an obligation to manage yourself. Second, you have an obligation not to be part of the problem, not to be a problem to others. And third, you have the obligation to the event. Regardless of what else we say, these family events are, if not sacred, at least important. And if you're going to attend, whether it's a Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner or it doesn't matter what it is, if you have made the decision to go, then you have an obligation to the event. Right. And we can't forget that's more important. The event is really more important. If your parents really want you there, then you have an obligation to them and to the event to make it work as well as you can. Right. So, again, once you make the decision, you are assuming responsibility for these three obligations, to yourself, to others, and to the event. Right. And remember that even if, again, whether it's work or it's Thanksgiving, if there is one person there that frustrates you, there's probably a lot of other people there who rely on you, who you enjoy spending time with, and we tend to focus on that one person and say, okay, I'm not going to Thanksgiving because she really ticked me off. Right. Remember what she did last year. Right. And instead of thinking about it this way, I know that she's going to be there and frustrate me, but I get to see all of these other people. I get to enjoy my time with all of these other people, so I'm going to maximize that. Making the most of the situation. Making the most of the situation. Right. So important. So. Yeah, and what we're talking about here, what Dr. Berney and I have been discussing here for almost an hour, is something that we call in our business positive psychology. Right. Make the best of the situation. Right. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've got a little bit of time left, and so I think that it would be great to shift and talk specifically about Black Friday stuff a little bit, okay? Because I do talk to a lot of patients and a lot of families about these kinds of issues, because as we're preparing for, especially Christmas, and even those who don't celebrate Christmas tend to use Christmas time as a time for buying gifts and for celebrations and things like that. They don't celebrate Christmas, but they use it for celebration. Right. Okay. So, so there's a little bit of advice that we often give to people that we're working with, and then people in general, and we write articles about it and everything, because just as all this other stuff that we've been talking about requires a little bit of planning, with a little bit of planning, you can make the most out of Black Friday and some of the other holiday stressors, such as spending and those kinds of obligations. We get into this frame of mind during this time of year where we become stressed and overwhelmed because we have this obligation to buy this person a gift, or we have to show our appreciation for this person, so we need to do this or we need to do that. We begin to stretch ourselves, and we begin to financially and emotionally stretch ourselves to the point where the holidays are not very enjoyable. I think your use of the word celebration is exactly key, is that this is supposed to be a time of celebration, but yet we turn it into stressful times by just some of our simple actions. Right. So there's three things that I encourage people to consider when thinking about either Black Friday
or holiday spending in general. And the first one is to make smart purchases.
Right.
We tend to buy things sometimes for the sake of buying things.
Right.
I remember I got a gift once that was a beautiful basket of and it's will be funny to say it this time because I actually drink coffee now. At the time, I didn't drink coffee. I hated coffee. But it was this nice, beautiful bag of gourmet coffee. Well, if that person really knew me, they would know that I don't drink coffee.
Well, you didn't. Yeah.
At that time, I didn't drink coffee. I would love to have that basket now.
We've converted him since. So
That's right. I drink too much coffee now.
That's right. Now he's overdoing it.
But, making smart purchases, because then the gift is more meaningful, and you find that you don't have to spend as much because you're finding something meaningful for the person instead of just buying something for the sake of buying something.
Right.
Had that person, they probably spent $30 on this gourmet coffee, but to be honest, if you would have bought me at that time, if you would have bought me a 4-pack of Monster energy drink, I would have been perfectly happy with that. And then you could have spent like $6 and everything would have been great. So, but knowing the person and making smart purchases is very important. So that's the first thing. The second one is avoiding impulsive spending. When you go out to buy for others, whether it's people at work or family members or something, you need to create a list. It's dangerous business to go out and say, I'm going to go shopping and not have a plan.
That's right.
Because you get out and you start finding things, and sure, a 32-inch TV for $200 may be a great deal. But does your 5-year-old really need a 32-inch TV in their room? Probably not. So, you want to avoid that impulsive spending because the goal of marketing today is to hit you in the amygdala, to where you say, man, I can't live without this.
It's avoid impulse buying.
You have to avoid impulsive spending. So create a list. Sit down with your significant other or whoever else might be involved. Sit down with them ahead of time and make a list of people that you need to buy for, that you're planning to buy for, and again, sort of like making smart purchases. Identify what kinds of things you need to get for those people. Search the internet. Every store has a website that has their inventory listed, and you can go on and you can see how much things cost, what you're going to get, and then go to the store and get those things. When it's Dr. Richard and I often talk about the difference between watching TV and watching a program. When we watch TV, we tend to spend too much time in front of the television.
Yeah, you're watching whatever is on. It's called least objectionable programming.
Right. That's when we're surfing the channels trying to find something to watch. Versus watching a program. If you watch a program, you're watching something specific. You're watching with a purpose.
Right.
Now we're going to talk about spending or shopping for a gift versus shopping.
Right.
If you're just shopping, you're just looking for anything, least objectionable gift.
Object, right.
Versus shopping for a gift, something that is specific to the person that you're trying to get. And we find that we tend to spend less. We tend to be less stressed when we do that little bit of planning and we prepare for that. The third one is you got to have a budget.
Right.
We live in an economic environment now where very few of us have money to waste.
Right.
And people, starting in January, our schedule will be full of people coming in talking about how stressed they are because of the hole that they dug for themselves through the holidays.
Right.
And so when we talk to these folks, what we find out is that they kind of went into it open-ended. They just were getting things. They maxed out their credit cards. They purchased things that they don't need. And as within a couple of months, the hundreds of dollars of items that they bought their kids, you ask them, and the majority of those things are pushed away into the closet and aren't even used.
Dumped in the toy basket.
Yeah.
Right.
So making smart purchases, it doesn't have to be extravagant. Our kids, we teach our kids what to expect from us. And so if we teach our kids to expect that they're going to have, that the Christmas tree is going to be covered with toys, that's what they're going to expect. And they may be disappointed if it's not like that.
Right.
Conversely, if we teach them that, you'll have one major gift and you'll have 4 or 5 minor gifts, however we define that, right. Well, that's what they expect, and then they're satisfied with that.
That's right.
So we need to make sure that we go into it with a budget. We don't overpromise or oversell what's going to happen for Christmas. If your kid is looking at this $2,000 motorcycle, your 8-year-old son is looking at this $2,000 dirt bike, and he's like, I really want that. And you say, oh, well, it's almost Christmas. You're setting him up to think, hey, that's a possibility for Christmas. Right. And so when he doesn't get it, he may be disappointed. So avoid those kinds of things. There's no reason to set it up to be something that it just can't be. And again, when we do that, we find that it goes much smoother. We spend less. We restrict ourselves to the budget that we have available for it, right. And it reduces stress.
That's right. Yeah, and what we're talking about here, once again, as we did with Thanksgiving, what you're asking people to do with these 3 things, in following these 3 steps, is you're asking them to be mindful. Be mindful of what you're doing. Be mindful of the people you're buying for. Be mindful of your own budget. And it's this concept of mindfulness that we want to keep talking about. You have to spend some time thinking about it, organizing your own thoughts, and managing your own expectations and managing the consequences, because there are always consequences to manage, and we have control of how we're going to react to these things.
Exactly. So I guess the moral of the story for all of this that we've talked about today is...
what's the take-home message?
The take-home message is that you are in control of your destiny.
That's right.
You are in control of how you manage all of these things.
That's right. Of what you do,
where you go,
and of where you go, how much money you spend. That's all under your control.
Right.
And also, you're under control of your own reactions to what happens when you're in those situations.
Right. We tend to feel like we are forced to do things that we don't want to do. And again, admittedly, there are situations where that may be the case.
That we might not want to do it, but we decide to do it for some other reason.
Right.
But once you've made that decision, then you have these 3 obligations.
Right. Because even in situations where we're told, as an example, your boss tells you, oh no, you will do this.
Yeah.
You still have a choice to say, no, I'm not going to do it. Right. And the consequence may be that you lose your job, but you still have the choice.
It is your decision.
And as soon as recognizing that type of control that you have over your life, once we accept that, we find that we're far less stressed.
That's right.
We realize that, I'm not completely under somebody else's control.
That's right.
I have some say.
And I don't have to go there.
Right.
We may feel that, but no, you don't have to go.
Right. And so we encourage you, keep that in mind as we're approaching the holidays, and then again taking this message to other times of your life.
Take it into next year. Take all the same advice into next year.
Absolutely. These would be great New Year's resolutions. Just
right.
I'm going to realize that I have some power over decisions and situations in my life.
I have a lot of autonomy and I have a lot of control, and most of us just don't exercise it.
Right. And we are certain that if you do that, you will find more happiness, less stress. Right. You will be more satisfied with the things that you're doing in life. You will find that you're making decisions that better suit who you feel you are, right. who you want to be in life. And that's really what it's all about.
You'll have less stress, fewer regrets, and less resentment.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
Right.
you'll be happy.
You're going to be happier.
And that's what life's all about. Life's all about being happy. That's what I tell all of my patients the first time I see them. I say, I'm all about finding a way to help make sure you can be as happy as you can be.
That's right.
Because that's, if there is a meaning of life, the meaning of life would be just be happy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Enjoy yourself a little bit.
Right.
So, anything else?
That's it.
All right, so that's it for today. Back to work. We got a lot of things to do today.
We do.
We already mentioned the workshop for next month. So enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Richard, enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Think of how you're going to do this Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Go fishing.
Go fishing.
Yeah.
Have a fish sandwich at the beach instead of turkey.
You don't have to have turkey.
No, you don't.
No. So have a great Thanksgiving. We'll be back next week to talk to you more about things to hopefully make your life happier and better.
Right.
And help you enjoy things a little bit more. So have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next week.
Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
All right, bye-bye.